Welcome to Faith Fondue, a podcast featuring author and educator Haley DeMaria and teacher and blogger Ann Strickers. Faith Fondue features a melting pot of topics ignited by a flame, our faith, and guided by the Holy Spirit. This is the 4th episode of Season 5, and we are looking forward to continuing with our new component to the podcast, which combines the flame, what's hot, our spiritual stew, what we're reading, watching, and listening to, and the melting pot, what we are taking away and how we're implementing it in our lives, and all how it relates to being a woman of faith. It's a sad week in college athletics, and especially for the Notre Dame family, as it was announced yesterday, March 4th, that former head football coach Lou Holtz passed away at age 89. Ann, welcome to episode 4.
Thank you, Haley, and what a wonderful opportunity it is for both of us to pay tribute to a man that was so much more than a football coach. When you said things you're reading, I thought about several of his books that I've read in the past that are attributed to him, his philosophies, his teachings, his message. So it really, he was the coach all 4 years when both you and I were students. He's one of the first people I heard speak on campus. I think you have a much more detailed experience of meeting him, so I'm looking forward to hearing that as in your time as a student. I'm also curious to know afterwards if you continued to interact or, and somehow connect with him. It's been just wonderful and very touching to see a number of our classmates, fellow alums, people who've continuously posted photos with Coach. He was very accessible and truly loved Notre Dame. He loved football, he loved his family, he loved Notre Dame students. So Haley, maybe you can start. I'd love to hear more about your stories and memories of Coach Holtz.
Absolutely. It's a privilege to talk with you about it and just to share it in general. I too have seen many of the tributes that have come out about Coach Holtz, some of them from people I know, some of them from ESPN, just members of the sports community across the country. He was, for being 5'6", he was a tremendous presence across the country and probably the world. Certainly not only in football, not only in the Notre Dame family, but everywhere. And I've appreciated the common themes that people have shared: his faith, his humor, his dedication to his family. He was married to his wife for over 50 years, nearly 60 years, I believe. Beth, she passed away a few years ago. And, one of the tributes that I read was Mike Greenberg's, and he shared that the best advice he's ever received from anyone about anything was from Coach Holtz, and that is, the best thing you can do for your children is to show them how much you love their mother every day. And Coach Holtz certainly lived that. One of the last times I connected with him, it was shortly after his wife's passing, and I still have the voicemail that he sent, and it talks about his wife, and then just shares some other personal sentiments. But he was a man of faith. And one of the other tributes that I watched was an ESPN tribute. He had such a interesting, I don't even want to say love-hate, because I think there was a deep mutual respect interaction with Mark May and other members of ESPN as Dr. Lou. And, one thing that was asked at the end with Reese Davis, who was a very close personal friend as well as a colleague, was, is there ever going to be another Lou Holtz? Could there ever be another Lou Holtz? And I'm not going to get the sentiment exactly correct, but he said something along the lines of, he was the right person at the right time in the right place to do what he did. And that's so true. He is quintessential Notre Dame, but I feel so lucky. I know you do too. And really, I'm sure everybody who was on campus from 1986 to 1996 feel really fortunate that he was our coach. And again, not only on the football field, which was extraordinary and exciting, but even just being able to be witness to who he was as a man of faith and a family man.
No doubt about it. I remember freshman orientation. We gathered students and parents in the ACC, and he was one of the speakers. So, university president, Father McMalloy, the provost, the dean of students, Patty O'Hara, and Coach Holtz. And his message was, a well-known acronym that he used in many of his teachings. It was, students, you're here, you're not at home anymore, you're going to be juggling a lot, dorm life and your studies and, the challenges that go with, being a freshman, a new student at a new school. And he just said, one of the things to live by is this acronym WIN, what's important now. Decide for yourself when you have deadlines, but when you have obligations, what's important now. It's 30 years later. I still remember that acronym and that question, and I've used it many times in my life. So that's just one small example of him as a coach and as teacher. He certainly, abided by this rule of 3 questions, for his athletes. And I think we can return to some of his philosophies later. So much to give thanks for and remember about Coach.
Absolutely. So the first time I met him, I was in the hospital after the bus accident. And this is, so of course, it's January, maybe February 1992. And that football season, we played Florida in the Sugar Bowl. And this was the famous Cheerios Bowl where Florida was ranked very high. We were not. I think most people would say we only got into the bowl because we were Notre Dame. And Coach Holtz used to love to tell the story that he was at a restaurant and someone came over and said to him, "What's the difference between Notre Dame and Cheerios? Cheerios belong in a bowl." Well, my brother is a Florida Gator, and so I watched that game at home with my Florida Gator brother, and of course, I loved every minute of it. It was I don't want to say we dominated, but it was not. I don't remember it being a close game, and so with my brother being at Florida, he, through his connections, got a Sugar Bowl pennant and had Steve Spurrier sign it and brought it to me in the hospital. So I had a Sugar Bowl pennant in the hospital with Steve Spurrier's signature. And Coach Holtz showed up one day in my hospital room and said, "I hear you have something I need to sign." And so, of course, he came in and we spoke, and I don't remember much of the conversation beyond that.
Okay.
I know he shared encouraging words. My guess is we probably prayed together because he certainly was a man of faith.
Yeah.
But I still have the Sugar Bowl pennant, that is signed by Steve Spurrier and Coach Holtz, and that really began a mutual respect and friendship that he and I had. One thing that Coach always told his players, and I start most of my talks with this, is the quote, "Show me a leader and I'll show you someone who's overcome adversity." Coach Holtz really believed that adversity built character. And I think when I was a student athlete there during that time, I was one of the most visible, well-known examples of an athlete who was overcoming adversity. And so I know he had a lot of respect for that and for what I was able to overcome. And I also think we both shared this belief that Notre Dame is what helps and make that happen. And, I know that I would not have healed the way I did. I've said it all the time. If I wasn't at Notre Dame, if I didn't have the faith and the community that surrounded me, and he certainly believed and lived that too. But it began a nice relationship that I've truly treasured over the years.
Wow. That is incredible. Yeah, just that I could just imagine him walking in and using that line, right? And again, his humor, but also, his presence and prayer. So I think that's really, what a gift, what a great story too. And that's a great quote. I love that because I think there's a lot of truth in that. just have a few recollections. The first weekend as a student, there was the Dillon pep rally. The first pep rally of the year was outside of Dillon Hall. He showed up. It was a Thursday night. That's Coach Holtz. He was very present.
Yes.
So I would say that. So it does not surprise me that he came to your hospital room. And I love that he did that. I don't take that for granted. It's just really consistent with who he was. So I remember that. I remember junior parents weekend. I don't know why I was with my parents, like in a very unsuspecting part. I call it the bowels of the ACC. Like we were walking this hallway and I have no idea why we were where we were, but we were totally alone. And I'm not joking. Beth and Lou Holtz, like were walking right toward us. And so for my dad, I was just so excited because he loved Coach Holtz so much. So we just, talked briefly, where are you from? It's great that you're able to be here. JPW, they have children that went to Notre Dame as well. So they had obviously been part of Junior Parents Weekend. So I have a picture of my dad, my mom, and myself that Beth Holtz took with Coach Holtz. And it wasn't till much later that he came out to the Bay Area for the Stanford football weekend. And he spoke at a lunch. He came out just for that lunch. He met with former players. He didn't even stay for the game, Haley, but just how totally generous he was that this, very committed, enthusiastic, passionate alum, Don Smale, wrote to him and talked to him about the importance of him being at this lunch. And he came and he spoke, and then we needed to take him to the airport. So I had 30 minutes in a car with Coach Holtz, which
Wow.
I now am like pretty grateful for. And so we're waiting for the car, right? And he's wearing, one of my favorite items, and a sweater from Augusta National. And I said, Coach, how often do you get to play? The Augusta National is the home of the Masters tournament, very, very private club. And I knew he was a member. Most people do if you're a fan of Coach Holtz. And he said, oh, not enough, and my swing, I've lost a lot of speed on my swing, and, talking like a golfer does. And he said, the last time I was there, I was paired up with this gentleman, and his name's George Strait. And I said, well, what do you do for a living? And he said, well, sir, I'm an entertainer. I'm a singer. And I said, oh, well, good. What kind of music? He didn't even know. George Strait is like the king of country, especially in Texas. Like they could fill the rodeo stadium with him. And I just loved, he was so unsuspecting. It was such a good, moment. But, we talked in the car, and he wanted to know, like, who was I? He said, what do you do? And I said, I'm a teacher and a coach. And he wanted to know all about all of us in the car. And I'm thinking, we want to talk to you about your experiences. But that was just a small insight into Coach Holtz.
But Anne, it's a small insight, but it's really exactly who he was, and I think who everyone knows him to be. I sent my sister, I let my family know yesterday when I heard the news, and I, just wanted to pass it along and share the news with them. And my sister wrote this back to me, and I'm going to read it because I pulled it up on my text messages. She said, I only met him once at a pregame meal with you and Jamie, but he made you feel like you were as important as anyone else. And I thought that is so true. And that is exactly who Coach was. And what a gift to have, to make every single person feel like you are the most important person he could be speaking to at that moment. And you and I, we've talked about it before. We know people when you're talking to them in the room and they're looking around and they're, looking to see who else is there. And that was not him. When he was speaking with you, you were the most important person that he could be speaking to at that time. And we all felt that way. And for those of us who were lucky to have conversations with him, and even my sister who, met him once to probably just say hello. And she felt that too and remembered that so many years later.
Yeah.
And I love your stories. I love your stories about the pep rally and the bowels of the ACC. I know exactly what you're talking about. Anyone who's been there knows exactly where it is. And truly one of my most fantastic memories from being a student at Notre Dame takes place at a pep rally in the bowels of the ACC. And I tell this story often because it is something I will never forget. And it was truly a highlight for me. In the fall of 1993, Number one Florida State came to South Bend to play number two Notre Dame. It was the game of the century for diehard college football fans. Notre Dame fans are not. That this is the first time that ESPN Game Day went on the road. They were, set up on campus. It kind of started the game day on the road trend. And I was asked to speak at the pep rally. It was the first pep rally on campus after my first race back. So I had just competed for the first time. And Coach Holtz asked me to speak at this pep rally. And we had a meet that night. So I had skipped the last relay to, get ready. And I remember, again, walking from the pool to the ACC, at the Joyce Center, which is what it is now, basically the basketball arena, which is where we used to have our pep rallies. And I was in those back hallways in the bowels of the ACC. And the whole team used to go to all the pep rallies, and they were all lined up. And I was supposed to walk in with the team. And so I'm standing there amongst all these football players who are much larger than I am. And they're all talking about who the speaker is and who's the speaker going to be. Because, of course, Notre Dame could have anyone they wanted. And they kept saying,
especially that game.
And that's exactly what they said. I remember, some of these players talking about, oh, my gosh, it better be somebody good. Oh, my gosh, this is the biggest game of the year. Maybe it's Regis Philbin, who has passed away since, but was a huge alum at the time. Maybe it's Joe Montana, who we all know. And every person they name, I am trying to just creep back further into the wall because, of course, I am none of those people. And I can see it in my mind, but one player just turned and saw me and said, and I remember saying, it's just me. And I remember that player said, oh, we did get someone awesome. Oh. And it took all my nerves away. Here I was walking into a stadium of, gosh, probably at this point, 13, 15,000 people, 18, as many as you could pack in there. And I was not nervous. If I was good enough to speak to the players who were playing in the biggest game of their lives, I could do it. And that is a highlight for me. Coach Holtz gave me the game ball from the game, the previous home game, which was the Navy Notre Dame game, which I love because, of course, Navy has become such an important part of my life. But that Notre Dame Florida State pep rally will always be a highlight for me. And I am so grateful that Coach Holtz gave me that opportunity to play just a small role in that monumental weekend.
Yeah. No, I listen to that story and I think about, my own students, and I think about, Notre Dame students. And I think, that story could have gone much differently. Obviously, it could have been like, yes. And somebody stepped forward and said that and felt that way. That makes my heart swell. I'm so, thank God for, that person and that moment. It just gave you that ability to rise to the occasion. You would have anyways, but, imagine if it had been different, and we don't have to. So
But I also think that speaks to the leadership of Coach Holtz on that team. He was raising good humans. He was coaching men to not only play football, but to be good men. And that played out in that hallway leading into that pep rally. I truly believe that was his leadership. And again, I'm forever grateful for that.
Yeah. Well, he definitely gave them the ability to see things and, that you're speaking about leadership. And I know after they won the national championship, and this is in the Reggie Ho documentary, it's a 30 for 30. Reggie Ho was the kicker on the national championship team. He said, I'm going to get emotional. He said, this is not the most important thing you will do in your life. He's like, they just won the national championship. And that's like what he says is like the first thing to these people. He says, you'll be fathers, you'll be, your sons, you will be friends, so many different things. He's like, husbands, like that's what's important. And I was like, wow, again, like what the power of that messaging is, Yeah, that's what we need in leaders.
It is what we need. And I think what he was also saying to them is, you are so much more than football players.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is such a critical message that I think has been lost a little bit in
Yeah.
how many
Yeah.
current college players feel. But,
No doubt.
he certainly was going to celebrate with them as much as anyone.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he also
Right.
wanted them to know that this is an amazing accomplishment, but you are so much more than this.
Yeah.
And make sure that you continue to live your life to believe that.
Yeah. Well, and that resonates, in our second episode, we talked about Father Nate Wills, who's the chaplain of the Notre Dame football team, his book, Pray Like a Champion. So there's a thread. He said the biggest part of his job today is, convincing these players, young men, that they are more than their role as a football player, like their position, what they do on the field. So yes, that is only affirmed. Coach Holtz planted those seeds long ago. And, one of his, I guess, teachings, and this is in his book, but, for success, and it resonates with who they are beyond football. Now, the 3 questions that he asks every player are, can I trust you? So he says, as a leader, these are the things that he, instills in his players. 1, can I trust you? 2, are you committed to excellence? And 3, do you care about me? And all of, those are rooted in relationships. So trust is so, I don't know that we think enough about trust. It's essential in a relationship because, this was the commencement speaker for Notre Dame. It was the Grady from like 2 years ago. Trust is a precious commodity because once it's broken, it is so hard to get back. And so, yes, as a coach and a player, or as a husband or wife, as a student and teacher, all of our relationships, they grow, they thrive with trust. And then committed to excellence. You don't win a national championship unless you are, we're not here just to play football. They have a goal, right, to be excellent. And where that takes us, is the story that is to be written. But are you committed to it? And yeah, do I care about you? Because we do a lot more. We will, when we care about each other, gosh, that leads to, right, self-sacrifice, to hopefully making choices for, the good of the whole or the other person. I love those questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And he's got so many tidbits and quotes like that I think people, well, 1, have been posting, 2, have been talking about, but 3, just live every day. And it's so simple, his questions that he challenges us with,
Yeah.
and yet
Right.
so hard to do at the same time. And I think back to something else he often says is, when he talks about, just kind of a general philosophy about life, his 3 words, trust, love, commitment. And that's exactly what he's saying here, right? The trust,
Yep.
the love, and the commitment.
Yeah.
Again, simple in theory, but really hard to play out as well. And he also had some funny ones too. One of my favorite quotes that, I think about all the time is, don't tell people your problems. 90% of them don't care, and the other 10% are glad you have them. I think about that sometimes too. He was such a great speaker. I could listen to him all the time. He could tell the same stories, and he did at every speech. But there was just something about the way he presented it so humbly with humor that was so genuine. I've listened to a lot of his either commencement speeches or other speeches that are on YouTube recently because there's just, again, it's so simple, but there's such wisdom in it. And, I was fortunate that my boys got to hear him speak too. He came to Baltimore and to a fundraiser, and I said, guys, we're going because I wanted them to experience and just get a glimpse into this person that meant a lot to me as well. One thing I haven't mentioned, but I've talked about before, is he wrote the foreword to my book. And that is something that I have that I, will always treasure with just the memories and the lessons that he taught. So he's been a name that's, been in my family, and my kids know as someone as important to me. But again, he's important to everyone who met him, and that was the gift that he had. And I really think is his legacy. When I think about, if we want to talk about the melting pot, our takeaway, my goal is to be someone that people can trust, that is committed to excellence, and that people know I care about them. But what I really want to do and make a conscious effort to be aware of is that idea of presence, is making sure that everyone and anyone I speak to feels like they are the most important I can speak to at that moment. I've heard it again and again from people who share tributes about him, and that clearly it makes a difference and makes an impact, and that I feel is something I could not only work on, but would really like to do.
Yeah, wow. I think that's a great takeaway. I know that same quality has been attributed to Arnold Palmer, who was, a great American golfer. Many people have said that, and I would imagine they had met at some point. And so, yeah, I would love to know. Maybe they're having a conversation in heaven up there. But, I think about his self-deprecating humor. And, one of the interesting things so I had in that, ride, I had a chance to tease him. He's always making the jokes, but I said, Coach, I think I coach girls golf, and at the time it was varsity girls. I said, I think I have a harder job than you. I said, I coach an individual sport, and it can be very challenging to get these young women to think like a team. I'm telling you, Haley, he did not miss a beat. He didn't fall for the joke. He didn't take it. He just said, what is so challenging about golf is that you can only focus on the moment. Players have a tendency to think ahead, or when they've messed up, hang on to that. With golf as a team sport, every hole counts. So you really need to stay in the moment. And I'm like, here's this guy in the back of a car. He's not wearing a seatbelt, by the way. He said he hated wearing a seatbelt. I think he was kind of I think in some ways he was this renegade. He also told me he ate junk food and was not healthy at all.
So that's true. That is true. He was a big McDonald's strawberry milkshake and Diet Coke drinker.
The sugar. Yeah. Because that's so funny, because part of that conversation was, about golf and kind of my golf story. But, Reggie Ho, the kicker I had mentioned, was an electrophysiologist. So, a heart doctor that focuses on the electrical part of the heart. And I said, if I lived in Philly, I would want him to be my heart doctor. And he said, well, what's the deal with your health? And I told him I have an ICD. And he said, well, how is it now? Again, listening, responding, and that's when he said, well, I'm really healthy. And, he was, it was until the end here that, 89, it's he had all, most of his faculties, obviously, no strokes, no heart issues. He said, I've been blessed. I have a terrible diet and I eat a lot of junk food. I can't explain it. So, it's that self-deprecating sense of who he was, not physically imposing by any stretch of the imagination. You see some of those pictures, like you said, I didn't realize he's 5'6",
I read somewhere.
5'6".
But Anne, that just goes back to how humble and kind, and again, I truly think it comes back to being a man of faith. He wanted to listen to you. He was interested in you, and I'm guessing made you feel like that you were the perfect person that he could sit next to in the car. And he wasn't talking about himself. He was interested in you. And one of the things that he would always ask me and anyone else, I've actually seen other people post about this too. One of the things he would always ask anytime anyone saw him is, what can I do for you? What can I do for you? I remember when I introduced my boys to him, what can I do for you? You can say hi to my kids. You can just be here and be you. But that was who he was, and he really meant it. And again, there is a genuineness there that I think we all felt, and is really something to strive for in terms of just the way we can live our lives by following his example.
Yeah. Well, to me, that's really a sign of servant leadership too. I mean, this is
Exactly.
somebody who had so many opportunities, doors open to him, and met, no doubt, incredible people. And so, out of that privilege, what can I do for you?
Right.
Stop to take a picture. Yeah, listen to you. Ask you how your health is today. At the end, he gave us a keychain. He had these keychains that he would give to people. And he left us with that. He said, I want you to have these. Thanks for what you did for the local Notre Dame club. And again, his love for Notre Dame, just his willingness to be with us for a short period of time. So we're so grateful. I'm so grateful I had that experience.
We are grateful, and that was a sentiment that I shared with one of his players who I'm close to. Was, our hearts are broken, but they're filled with gratitude at the same time. And I know many people across the country are feeling exactly that way. We're grateful for his life. We're grateful for his legacy. Our hearts are broken, but they're also rejoicing because he is with his God and he is with his wife. And I know he was looking forward to that. And so, of course, we're rejoicing because of that. But we'll certainly miss his presence, even though it will remain with us. And I certainly look forward to continuing to read the tributes and pay tribute to him, not only through this podcast and through other ways, but also by the way we live our lives.
No better way to do it. So I would conclude, listen to the overture of 1812. I think, so I played, the part of it in class. So I think it's like 15 minutes, but that last, minute and a half, that is how the third quarter concludes the start of the fourth quarter, and the student body unites with the arms folded and the L for Lou. So anyone who may have been known and loved and touched by his life and his message and his undying support of Notre Dame on, Lee Corso and game day, he always picked the Irish. Even when we know it wasn't, just that undying loyalty. The one time he didn't, Haley, is when Notre Dame played, was it Central Florida, where Skip, his son, coached?
Oh, right.
And we lost. So what a dad.
What a dad. Exactly. A family man, always first. Yeah. Well, thank you, Anne, for letting me share in these memories of Coach Holtz.
Yes. Those are great stories.
Again, a sad day, but rejoicing for his eternal life.
Amen.
Amen.